Good evening, viewers. My name is ARSHAD WAHEED, and you are watching Artlit Review. This is a new program PTV World has started, and the main purpose of this program is to discuss various aspects of arts and literature, different forms of arts like film, theatre, TV, music, paintings, and we will do it through discussions, interviews, book reviews, and reporting various cultural and literary events. For today's discussion, we have chosen the topic of novel as an art form, and we are having very esteemed guests with us who will talk about novel as a form, how it evolved, and what are the challenges it's facing in contemporary times. Let me introduce them to you first. Shujaat Hussain, he is Associate Professor of English. He has been teaching English literature since more than last 20 years. And his main areas of interest are literary criticism and literature and different forms of literature. We have with us Dr. Sara Ali, who is PhD in English literature, and currently she is teaching as assistant professor at Qaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. Her poetry and her research articles have been published in various international journals. Her main area of interest is literature and sociology, and her current research deals with exploring vocabulary for representation of Pakistani masculinities. So welcome you to this discussion, Dr. Sara. Our next guest is Dr. Waqas Masood. He is a tenured professor at Contextual University in physics department, and his recent pursuits are exploring novel as a medium to map human existence, and he is also recipient of Presidential Pride of Performance for year 2012. Before we start our discussion, we'll have please watch a small report on the topic will be discussed later.
Novel, a genre of fiction, is a prose narrative of considerable length and a certain complexity that deals imaginatively with the human experience, usually through a connected sequence of events involving a group of persons in a specific setting. Novel, with its devices of plot, characters, settings, and narrative methods, has explored various aspects of human existence, philosophy of life, and the spirit of its age. The novel illuminates inner selves of human beings in its own way. It unmasks the secret life of feelings, discovers man's rootedness in history, everyday boredom, intrusion of irrational into human behavior, the role of myths that controls our actions, and many other aspects of human life. It probes time through elusive past or elusive present and presents a unique study of man's interactions with the society and nature. The spirit of novel is the spirit of complexity. Every novel says to its readers, the things are not as simple as you think. However, the spirit of novel, to keep the human life under a permanent light of inquiry and discovery, has been drastically affected by an aggressive and powerful media. This media distributes throughout the world the same simplifications and stereotypes which are easily acceptable by the greatest number of people and make them to accept glib answers. In a time when people's critical thinking has been reduced by short attention span, what are the novel's possibilities of exploring human nature in contemporary era? Would it survive as an art form or will not stand the test of time? Let's have a look into it.
Shujaat, would you tell us how a novel evolved as an art form?
Well, that's a really big question.
Yeah.
Novel comes from the word it shares the root with this word novelty, so it means something new. So basically, all novels are stories, and stories have always been there. Since the dawn of civilization, human beings have been telling. In fact, even before civilization, human beings have been telling stories
Through pictures,
through different media, through cave paintings, through oral transmission. Yeah. So there have been oral cultures, and the first form which exists everywhere is, of course, poetry. So how did we get to this particular art form, novel? That's again a long story, but skipping medieval times and antiquity, we'd come straight to the rise of English novel, basically, or let's say European novel, to expand it a bit. We have, I mean, experts say that the tales of Janji and the Arabian Nights were the precursors of this form. The first person who is credited with the invention of this art form is Cervantes, whose novel Don Quixote was written in Spain in early 17th century. So we have almost 4 centuries for the evolution of this art form in Europe and in English-speaking world.
And even other parts of the world.
Even in other parts of the world, of course. For example, the tales of Janji come from Japan, and the Arabian Nights come from the Middle East. So there have been writings which can be considered prototypes for the form as it exists today or as it is popular today. There have been similar writings in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, and from other parts of the world, even in India. But novel as we know it today started in Europe, especially Spain, although the French would say that they started it first. There is a little bit of controversy over that. But most experts of literature and critics agree that the first novel was Don Quixote by Cervantes. So and this novel particularly, why I'm going to just say a couple of things about it, that it was a kind of satire with realism. So it kind of heralded an end to the chivalric times, because it was in a way a mocking of chivalry. And from there, if we head towards the English country, or let's say the British Isles, we discovered that the first novel, some people think that Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe was the first novel. Some consider Moll Flanders' first novel, again by the same writer. 2-3 people in 18th century England are credited with the rise of the novel in England. Of course, Daniel Defoe, we have Richardson's Pamela, and we have Henry Fielding's Tom Jones. So these 3 works were basically didactic in nature. By didactic, we mean that the purpose of these writings was instruction, to instruct, and they were moralistic in nature. And so what is novel? Basically, again, coming to the basic question, if we define novel, novel is an extended prose piece which has a number of characters, and it kind of exhausts the possibilities of the narrative. So it's a narrative work of extended length, which has number of characters, setting, tone, everything. So it has in a way everything. It's I would say that novel, the popularity of novel today is because of its hybrid nature. So the English novel started as a realistic prose narrative. But then when we moved from 18th century towards early 19th century, the spirit of those times were captured in the Gothic novels, in romantic novels. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Jane Austen's novels belong to this period. I'm just going to summarize briefly.
You have given a brief history of novel, but it has evolved over time as well. Since we have 4 centuries, different kinds of novels have been written in different parts of the world. Shujaat has very briefly told us about history of novel, how it evolved, but it has been 4 or 5 centuries, and novel has evolved over time. Would you like to tell us how novel adjusted to its respective times?
So I will just build on what Shujaat Sahib has already said. I think this desire to tell stories has always been there, and either it's like we have seen travel narratives, we have seen poetry, we have seen drama. In the end, it all depends on what was available to people at that time, available expression. So first, when they did not have stage poetry, the oral narratives were there. When they had the stage, then they had drama. And then when they had the printing press and all those other, when literacy rate increased and they had technology, then we had novel. So all of these other factors have also contributed towards why a certain genre becomes the popular genre. So when we look at novel, especially in English, because I can only talk about English literature, it took the form of the most popular genre during Victorian era, during Industrial Revolution. When people had tales to tell, there was sentimentalism, and then people had recently realized that they could earn money through writing stories, writing something. So a lot of the novels, early novels, were published in the form of, or were released in the form of monthly and weekly installments. So they were, the newspapers, printing presses were like releasing their work, and that is why they always had those, first of all, they were sensational in nature because they wanted everyone to read them. And then they had cliffhanger endings, so a lot of people were excited about the next installment. So that is why the novel of that time was like lengthy. But with the passage of time, as people became more engaged in other things, the length of novel we have seen now decrease. Like we could see that when you look at Charles Dickens's novel, the length is different. Jane Austen's novel, the length is different. Then you come to Virginia Woolf and the length is different. And now if you look at it, novels are almost novellas. And there is this constant challenge of our decreasing attention span, because the technology has evolved so much. We have smartphones, we have other ways of entertaining ourselves like TikTok and other social media platforms, and people have found other ways of expression. So novel does face a challenge here, because not a lot of...
Well, we will come to this point later at the end of it, what challenges novel is
okay, I would
facing.
like to add something.
Please
here.
do.
As she has mentioned, of course, every art form needs certain material conditions to develop before it can arrive on the scene. So novels' rise can be attributed, it almost coincides with the development of or the arrival of Gutenberg press, which came in 15th century, and in 17th century, just after 2 centuries, you had huge populations of people who were literate, who could read and write. So only when you have a large audience of people who can read books, you would have a work of considerable length, which is in prose, which is not easy to memorize, which can be read but cannot be memorized. It came to the fore. So yeah, so if we must keep in mind that there is no literary without literacy.
Right. Well, we'll come again to this point which we have just raised about short attention span and technology. And just keep in mind, and I won't forget it. So Waqas, we have heard a very insightful discussion about novel as a genre, its form and its evolution. Can you just tell us what's the main function of novel in your opinion, and how novel has served the purpose of understanding human lives, human societies? I would like to hear from you.
You see, as Shujaat and Sara pointed out, that novel began in Europe. And this is the same place where the scientific knowledge, made big inroads, and the industrial society transformed from agrarian to industrial. So for some time, Europe also, the human beings also, when they were bombarded with a lot of scientific knowledge, so they started thinking that maybe that is the only thing that they need to focus. So there is this idea of forgetting of being also. But the important aspect to understand about novel as a genre is that it is all about exploring the complexities of human character, of responses of human beings in different situations. And most of the times the truths are very relative. So for instance, Anna Karenina, is a victim of a tyrant, a narrow-minded husband, or, Karenin is a victim of an immoral woman, or, Kay was guilty that divine justice was served by
Joseph K of the trial,
or, the other way around. So there is no absolute truth. The truth is relative. And actually, you know, if you think about it, Socrates, you know, broached this topic: what is good and what is bad, what is truth, what is justice. So he didn't arrive at any particular answer. And in fact, the novel also tells you that there is no such thing as absolute truth. And there are relative truths, and you need to live with the fact that things are relative, and you need to adjust to the wisdom of uncertainty. And I guess that this is the beauty of the novel, that it tells you that human beings are very layered. There is no such thing as an absolute truth, and we must try and adopt ourselves to this reality that there is a wisdom of uncertainty all around us.
Great. And that's what you think novel is a medium to explore human existence,
Exactly.
inner side of human conditions, what they feel, how they react to different things happening
Yeah.
around
For
them.
instance, this thing comes to my mind immediately, that in Albert Camus' The Stranger.
Oh yeah.
So you see, they're the main protagonist. He doesn't behave the way society expects him to behave, and then he becomes a social pariah, and whatever he has to experience, the fact of the matter is that he is not meeting the expectations of the people around him.
Yeah, you have brought very important topics into our discussion, that how these novels have portrayed human interaction with society, their issues of identity and self-discovery, relationships, power, like Joseph K., which some people think the character of Kafka's novel Trial, that it is kind of telling human beings being reduced to just instruments in a very powerful bureaucracy, just functionaries to take their to deliver what is wanted from them. So Shujaat, would you tell us? And some people also think that some novels like what you have just mentioned and many other great novels, they have also tried to grasp the spirit of their times. Some of them, people say like that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, sure. I would say that novel is a kind of departmental store for the soul of industrial man. Because, V.S. Naipaul has hinted at this. He says that novels rise, especially popularity in 19th century was because in 19th century you had England turning from agrarian economy to an industrial economy. So it created certain conditions where specialization reached a point where everyone had a limited life. So people could participate in other people's life, and even in these fictional characters. The purpose of these fictional characters was to increase the scope and capacity of human imagination. So they would participate vicariously in the lives of other people. We know that from the very start, novel was basically a picaresque novel, a wanderer who goes from place to place and deals with different types of people. So novel also lets the writers explore what might be, what they could have been, and the readers also enjoy this because unlike short story, novels give you a big scope for exploring those characters at length.
Yeah, so can I just add one thing? You see, we should also realize the fact that there is this perennial tug of war between the individual and the society. So novel also tells you about this tug of war, and there were times when the individual was supposed to conform to the norms of the society, but then there were novelists like D.H. Lawrence who talk about the individual liberty, and they then kind of dare to break the taboos. So the conventional thinking is also challenged, and the society is challenged that individual is also important. Even in Jane Austen, the main protagonist, at one point she can marry her cousin and she will have a good life, but she says she doesn't want to. Her happiness is supreme for her. So this sort of assertion of the individual is also very important.
Good. Sara, would you like to add something to that?
We see most of her, not most of her, but like At least in Pride and Prejudice, we see Elizabeth as a rebellious woman. But what we don't see is that in a lot of ways she's conforming to the society, and in the limited freedom that Jane Austen had experienced in her own way, she made the character rebel. So even in a rebellion, she's in some extent is not going beyond the kind of imagination her era, her society allowed.
Okay, great.
So I think that there are novels that go for very similitude, for realism, for depicting society as it is. And then there are novels that talk about what could have been, or what might have been, or what should be. So it oscillates
Well, what should
between
be something which is not
it
main
oscillates
interest of
actually.
novels.
It oscillates between realism and idealism.
Okay.
So there are novels that deal with ideal scenarios, like utopian, for example, fiction. Utopian novels would create a society, imaginary society, where human beings are happy and all problems are solved, etc., etc.
Well, we have discussed a lot that novel is actually a European form of art, which it started in Europe and it developed in Europe, it evolved in Europe. But now we see that there are many other countries, many other regions. We can see that a lot of good novel is being written there. Latin America is one example.
Yeah.
African novelists have done wonderful in the novels they have written, even in South Asia. So, and in Pakistan as well. So, would you like to comment on some of the novels you like in maybe they were written in South Asian perspective or in Pakistani perspective?
Well, we in South Asia, instead of novel, we had tales, what we call dastan. And here, of course, the European novel is an imported form in South Asia.
Of course, yeah.
And but you see the germs of developing a novel in Pandit Ratanath Sarshad's Fasana-e-Azad. That was the first novel I was introduced to. So it had a kind of cross section of society of that time.
Okay.
And the characters were we can still identify those characters around us. So it still has relevance.
Coming to contemporary times, if you could refer to some good novel written in South Asia and Pakistan.
Yeah, well, in Pakistan, as you know, Aag Ka Darya by Quradullah Haider, which is, I would say that it's a civilizational novel because it deals with Indian civilization from antiquity to modern times.
Okay.
There are novels, of course, in English too. In Pakistan, for example, Bapsi Sedwa's novels, Zulfikar Ghaus works do stand, distinct.
Sara, would you like to add some?
I think when we look at, especially if we look at just English literature, I think in South Asia we have seen it's still blooming, but in India, I think there are a lot of novels which we can say are amazing novels. Arundhati Roy's novels, especially God of Small Things, or even with Pakistani writers, we can say Kamla Shamsi's work, especially Home Fire, her recent novel, is beautifully written, and I think it's something that anyone can relate with because it's actually a reimagining of Antigone, and it's like it's set in Britain, and it's basically about British Muslims, but it kind of is relatable for anyone who has ever felt alienated, who has ever felt the world is against them. So it's a beautiful novel to read. Apart from that, I think Muhammad Hanif's Our Lady of Aliswati is one novel I always recommend people to read it because it's first of all it's about a Christian woman in Pakistan, a Christian nurse in Pakistan, something, the kind of people who are usually invisible to people around them. And it kind of, when you read it, it's so tragic, but it's so witty, it's so beautifully written that I think, it's something that, anyone can read. Yeah.
Waqas, I would like to hear from you.
Yeah, so because Shujaat has said that, even Quratulain can be considered as contemporary, so I would say for me, Aag Ka Darya stands out. As I say, basically there are contradictory truths which are juxtaposed, and it depends, what is your bent of mind and whether you relate to something. So, for instance, Arka Darya resonates with me because, you see, as he correctly pointed out, it's a civilizational model and it spans the, history of more than 2 millennia, and it's not without a purpose, because he's going to talk about the partition, and there are 3 major players: the Britishers, and then the Muslims and the Hindus. So she basically, gives you the history of everything. So we get to know about the subcontinent, and then the arrival of Muslims and the arrival of the East India Company and all. But the important thing is the name Arka Darya. It's about the cruelty of time. And I think one thing which has fascinated, and which humans have always found mysterious and not been able to reconcile with, is the subject of death. And all the time she talks about these things. So there are, and then of course one interesting bit is, like all the intelligent people of their times, she was also aware of the theories, for instance, when she talks about time. So at that point in time, Einstein's theory of relativity was there, and the whole concept of space and time changed. So she was aware of that, and she dabbles with it. She doesn't get into the details, but she tells you that she is familiar with this. But the way the concept of death haunts humans, she beautifully expresses it. And by the way, while I was telling you that all the great minds know of the changes which are happening around them, for instance, Shakespeare was familiar with the heliocentric theory of the universe, Copernicus' theory that sun is the center, it's the star, and the planets are revolving around it. So similarly, Kuratulan was also familiar with that the space and time concept has changed drastically, and the way the Galilean universe is no longer there, and now we have a different universe. So
Yeah.
that sort of a thing, in my view, makes the novel very special. So Kuratulan Hadar's Arka Darya stands out for me.
Okay, but that brings another question, that in a novel, is study of human beings is more important, or the knowledge about universe, about other things, and historical events, they are more important? I mean, what is the focus of a novel? So all these things what we have been talking about, where do these lead to which point? I mean, what novel is trying to say something? I mean, you can also say
So the
something.
novel has everything for everyone.
Okay.
So if you read historical novels, you can use it as a time capsule to be transported to another era. You can see characters dealing with each other and making decisions of their lives. If you want to see how human psyche works and how other people have lived their lives, you can maybe go for psychological novel. If you want to study a particular era, particular society, you can go for sociological novel. So novel has everything. So novel is it has always been an experimental form. Okay. And even, I mean, you would find, for example, these divisions, like we divide novels into different eras, like postmodern novel, modern novel, Victorian novel. But you would find that even postmodern novel existed at the very start of the rise of the novel. Like the works of, for example, Lawrence Sterne, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, can be considered a postmodern novel, but it was not written exactly after the war when most of the...
So it transcends boundaries of time.
Yeah, it transcends all these boundaries, and anyone can make any use of the novel. Probably the few conditions, even prose is not the condition, because there have been novels in verse.
Yeah, Vikram Seth's novel. Yeah.
Yeah, so all of these conditions can be lifted that's why it's so hard to define novel.
Yeah, so I wanted to say something earlier, that you see, the importance is that the purpose of novel is to explore the undiscovered segment of human existence. So I look at it that way. So whatever progress is happening around you, the main focus is humans.
Yeah.
The multi-layeredness of human nature, and of course, when everything around you is evolving, you are also evolving as a human. Okay. So I think the main focus is human, and there is a welter of contradictory truths juxtaposed together in great novels. and then they don't tell you what is right and what is wrong. It is left to the reader and to your imagination. What do you make out of it?
Okay, but I mean, coming to our recent times when things like what is wrong and what is right has quite blurred, and we also, as you have rightly pointed out, challenges of technology, short attention span. There are many other ways to have to pass time, and there's no time. There's maybe no need to reflect upon what's going on around. People don't give much time to complex idea to discover various things which are very important into their lives. Otherwise, they go for glib answers to everything. So, what do you think? Is it a challenge to the novel? Because as Waqas has pointed out, that its basic function is to understand human beings, their inner feelings, their relationship of individual and society, and other love and relationships, power, and how they influence human beings and how human beings transform society around them. So do you think novel is facing challenges both in terms of its content and it's also the challenges in the society in the form of technology and other very fast changing lifestyles?
So with
Fast
time,
moving lifestyles.
with time, of course, even an experimental form can become part of canon. And a canon is decided by university professors, by authorities who say, well, you have to study these great works of literature because they mean something great and they will add something to your life. But of course, film is first and foremost the greatest challenge to novel. Although, of course, when you show something, when you show people through flashbacks and through flash forwards, you still there is still room for imagination. A novel, I think, one reason why novel is still here is because it gives you more scope. It gives your imagination a better scope to delve into the deeper recesses of human psyche. Otherwise, film is really a credible challenge to novel.
Okay.
So first of all, I just want to say that we should not put that much of a responsibility on novel as a genre to exist or to flourish all the time or to have a purpose. I think novel, there will always be a space for novel. And I will tell you how. Even with movies today, if any movie if you look at, you just watch a movie and you will get to know that it has been adopted from a novel. The idea came from a novel. So the novel will still stay relevant. And then most of the Netflix series nowadays are adopted from novels. And what happens is that when people watch the movie, they go back to the novel. So in one way or another, novel will stay relevant. And another important thing to keep in mind is that during Victorian era, a lot of people wanted to read novels. But drama was still there. Poetry was still there. So even today, when we have TikTok, we have other ways of expressing ourselves, movies, we have series, Netflix, like people binge watch series now. And we have shorter fictions, flash fiction, form of poetry, which is also like prose. So we have all these easier way of expression and easier way of having entertainment without spending a lot of time or money. So, but still, novel is still going to keep its place. Like, it won't be the most important thing, but it will be there. There
this
will
is your
always
desire, or this is your realistic analysis?
No, even today when people, so it happened to me like a year ago when, I was talking to someone, I was like, in few years, because I teach fiction, so I was like, in few years, novel will not be there. They said, people have been saying this for past 20 years. When TV
But
came.
life has not changed so quickly in past 20 years as it's happening now.
It's happened.
Before 20 years.
Still we have bestsellers. Still we have bestsellers. Still
But we are
people are
talking of
reading.
literary novels here.
Even the literary novels, if you look at it, people are reading them. So a very simple example would be, Kamla Shamsi's work, Home Fire, right? Or Mohsin Hamid's work. So when people wanted to write about 9/11, when they wanted to show 9/11, what happened after 9/11, they went to Mohsin Hamid. They took his novel. That is a literary novel. We teach it, and it became one of the most read novel at that time. It was adopted into a movie. People went into reading novels to understand what people were feeling. They were watching movies, but they were also reading novels.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so
Waqas?
I would say novel would evolve as we are evolving, and we are evolving all the time. And as I already said, because the primary purpose is to map the human existence. So maybe the movies or the short stories, they can show you a shade of human existence. But if you want to appreciate the spectrum, novel is the go-to place. So I don't have any doubt that it will exist, but it will evolve the way we are evolving.
I still think that we belong to a generation who read a lot of novels, and we want to keep novel alive in our lives, but maybe
Yeah.
things are different otherwise. But let's just finish it at this note. And thank you very much, all of you, for very, very insightful discussion. And viewers will meet again next time with some other topic. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.